really appreciate it. Nice to see everybody. Yeah, I was just in Alabama 2 weeks ago, and then tomorrow in Virginia, tomorrow night, actually. I'm here tomorrow. I'm doing a classroom if anybody wants to come, just to hang out and talk and all that stuff. And I guess there's a reception afterwards you mentioned tonight. So I don't know if there's adult beverages there or not, but I find that's the best way to resolve the great issues in life. Just kidding. All you are under 21. So, well, I am the publisher of this magazine that you can see on the screen there, Skeptic Magazine. It's the quarterly publication of the Skeptic Society, which I direct. It's a 501c3 nonprofit science education organization devoted to investigating claims of the paranormal, pseudoscience, fringe groups, cults, claims of all kinds between good science, junk science, bad science, voodoo science, pathological science, non-science, and plain old nonsense. And unless you've been abducted by aliens and been on Mars, you know there's a lot of it out there. Nonsense, that is. Some people call us debunkers, but let's face it, there's a lot of bunk that needs debunking, and that's our job. That's what we do. So just to give you some idea, just make sure you can still hear me if I'm walking around. You're okay? You can hear me all right now? And you can hear me now? So we're not using AT&T in this room, I see. So, yes, I switched to Verizon too. So each issue of the magazine has a particular theme to it. By the way, you can pick this up at any Barnes & Noble or formerly Borders bookstores, wherever they went. Or just at skeptic.com, our webpage. And each one has a particular theme, like we did one on the future of intelligence. Are people getting smarter or dumber? Well, I'm from Southern California, so I have an opinion about this myself that isn't very positive. But in fact, it turns out people are getting smarter. IQ scores have been going up about 3 points on average every 10 years for the last century. It's called the Flynn effect. James Flynn is the psychologist who noticed a statistical trend that IQ scores had to be renormed upwards about every 10 years because, generationally speaking, people are just getting smarter. And not on the kinds of questions on the IQ test, not on the portions that have to do with what you learn, but on the matrices, the ones that require just like being able to rotate those figures in your mind, abstract reasoning, for whatever reason. Maybe it's the internet, maybe, but it started before the internet, so maybe it's just more cultural diversity, more multitasking, more just ability to reason, so who knows. My next book actually is going to be about sort of like a moral Flynn effect. I actually think we're getting more moral, but that's another lecture. We did one on artificial intelligence. When will computers achieve human-level intelligence? And we concluded that we're 5 years away and always will be. This turns out to be a really hard problem. How many of you saw the computer Watson, the IBM computer Watson, win Jeopardy against Ken Jennings and all that? Do you think it was an amazing feat, but do you think Watson knows that he won Jeopardy? It. Does the computer know he won? Did he think, yes, I won Jeopardy, I beat Ken Jen, oh yeah. Well, actually, I met the guy who built Watson. Ferrucci's his name, David Ferrucci at IBM. I asked him that question because I always ask this question rhetorically. Do you think Watson knows that he won Jeopardy? He said, yes, he knows. I said, really? How does he know? He goes, because I told him. Okay, well, you could program that in there. If you end up with the most points, let out a little cheer at the end or something. But does he feel happy that he won? How would you know? How would we know? So this actually turns out to be a big, hard problem in neuroscience and consciousness studies. What's it like to be a bat? Right? What would it be like to be a bat? I have no idea. Maybe if I downloaded an app for sonar and plugged it into my brain and developed the sensory apparatus to bolt onto my eyes and ears and so on, and I did sonar, I'd move a little further down the scale of batness to know what that feels like, and maybe if I grew wings and I developed the propensity to like to hang upside down in caves, then I'd really feel like, but at some point, to really know what it's like to be a bat, you just have to be a bat. And then you have the experience of batness, and then you'd be wondering what it's like to be a bipedal primate that asks idiot questions like that, right? So this is a problem that no one has solved, and maybe you students will figure this out. How do we scale up from neurons firing in your brain to the experience of life, whatever that is, right? We don't know. We did one on 9/11 conspiracy theories. Was 9/11 a conspiracy? Yeah, actually it was. By definition, 19 members of Al-Qaeda plotting to fly planes into buildings without telling us ahead of time constitutes a conspiracy. But that's not what the so-called 9/11 truthers think. They think it was an inside job by the federal government. The Bush administration orchestrated 9/11. Well, anyway, so we lined up all their claims and analyzed them one by one. But anyway, you know how we know that 9/11 was not orchestrated by the federal government? It worked. So you can join the Skeptic Society and get a membership and subscription, and if you don't, we're going to send the skeptical dog after you. He is skeptical. Here's the problem we face of understanding why people believe weird things. And if you don't think there's a problem of science education here on the East Coast, you should come to California sometime. Here is a conversation overheard in Rodeo Drive. This is an example of the need for better science education.
Mom, I really like this.
Cute.
What's it made of? Like from a cow?
Duh, Ashley. All wool comes from a cow.
Hey, we're losing some of my volume
The
there.
boy cow or the girl cow?
If there's any place that could use a county fair, it's LA. The boy cow. Okay.
Oh, you mean the one with
the tusks. Okay, I don't know what happened to my audio feed. It went to mono there. Okay, anyway, but you got the idea. It's a fake commercial, right? You know that. So in science, what we're doing is we're looking for natural explanations for natural phenomena and always ask the what's more likely question. What's more likely, that aliens traversed the vast distances of interstellar space and landed in Farmer Bob's field in Pucker Brush, Kansas and left a crop circle that says skeptic.com? Or that somebody with Photoshop just made a fake photo for me, right? Or before we say something is out of this world, first make sure that it's not in this world. Again, we can ask the what's more likely question, that aliens traversed the vast distances of interstellar space and landed in Sacramento, California, to help the governor take over my great state, or that the World Weekly News just makes stuff up. Well, we have no examples, concrete examples of UFOs or aliens landing anywhere on Earth, but we have lots of examples of tabloid newspapers just making stuff up and faking photographs. So just think about that for a second. Are aliens coming to Earth, or UFOs their spacecraft? Let's think about that like skeptics, like critical thinkers would. And just ask that what's more likely question. This is a UFO. This was photographed at my house. That's my house. I'm standing on, actually my daughter shot this photograph. That's downtown LA and Pasadena down there, and that's the bush on the edge of my cliff. And if that UFO looks like a Buick hubcap, that's because that's what it was. So I'm just off on the side doing frisbee tosses with hubcaps while my daughter and her friends are photographing UFOs, which we then packaged together for a Fox TV show and took them to a UFO expert who pronounced them, well, if not genuine, at least not faked. Well, how would you know, right? I mean, just by definition, it just means unidentified. That's all it means. But for some reason, culturally, we've come to equate unidentified with extraterrestrial. So the first principle of skepticism is that if you don't have proof, I don't know just means I don't know. Unidentified just means we don't know what it is. It doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. It doesn't mean it's paranormal. It doesn't mean it's supernatural or spooky. It just means I don't know. There's a bunch of unknown, unexplained things in life, and that's just the way it goes. And that's what graduate students are for in science labs, is to go figure those things out. But I want to talk about belief tonight. I want to start with the iconic poster from X-Files where Mulder wants to believe in UFOs. And that's the subject of my latest book, The Believing Brain, in which I begin with the brain as a belief engine. That is, we're pattern-seeking primates. We connect the dots. We think A is connected to B, and when we do, we learn something. This is called association learning. You remember from your intro psych classes with Pavlov's dog there, and you ring the bell, and you give him some food, and he salivates, and you ring the bell, give him some food, and he salivates, you ring the bell, and he salivates. He's associated the bell with the food, and that causes him to salivate, so the bell becomes a conditioned stimulus. Anyway, he's just made a connection in his brain. Or Skinner's rat in a box. You put him in the box. He's never been in that box before, but They're really curious animals, and they scurry around. They're very active, especially when you haven't fed them for a couple of days, and they're looking for food. And every time he gets near that little bar, you press a little button. You hold a little thing, you press a button, and it causes the food to slide down that little tube into that little bucket there. And he hears it, and he goes in there, and he smells it, and he eats it, and he's very excited. And he wonders what he has to do to repeat that. And so he moves around, and every time he gets near that bar, you click that switch, and then pretty soon you just make him actually touch the bar before you click the switch. And then pretty soon he touches the bar hard enough, because he's really hyper and excited about the food, and he hits the bar hard enough to close the electrical switch, causing the food to come down the pellet all by itself. And you can set down your little clicker, and that takes about 20 minutes to do. It's called operant conditioning, right? So he's connected A, the bar, with B, the food. He's made a connection in his brain, and that connection will stay there for a long time. All right, this research has been around for a long time. You mentioned I got my master's degree in experimental psychology. Let me tell you how long ago that was. That was a cutting-edge computer at the time. That is a programmable calculator, a Texas Instrument programmable calculator. That was cutting edge. I did my master's thesis on an IBM Selectric typewriter that had a key that lifted the errors off the page. It just like pulled the ink off the page when you made a mistake. You probably won't recognize these, you students, but these are called pencils. And those are data sheets before Excel spreadsheets. And this is one of my pigeons. So we were training the pigeon to peck the left key or peck the right key to get a little reward there. Same thing, same principle with the rats. You just have a little clicker until he gets closer, and then he pecks the key, and then he gets rewarded. So what we wanted to know is if you rewarded him twice as often on the left key as the right key, would he peck it twice as often? And the answer is not quite. Testing something called the matching law, but that's not important. What's interesting was that if you randomly give him a reward, whatever he happened to be doing just before the reward, he repeats that. So if he's out there and he does a little one of these things when he's moving around and he gets rewarded just randomly, he just repeats that again. By definition, a reinforcer is anything that causes an organism to repeat its behavior. So if he's randomly given rewards, he just repeats that behavior, whatever it is he happens to be doing. And that's called superstition. That's just magical thinking. You thought there was a connection between A and B, but there was no connection at all. Pure randomness. There's a lot of that in the environment. And if you think this is a subject because he's susceptible because of his little bird brain, if you go to Las Vegas or Atlantic City, you can see the same process going on in big brain bipedal primates sitting there at slot machines thinking they got the pattern figured out when they haven't got the pattern figured out. And like good Skinnerian conditioners, the owners of these casinos know exactly how much they need to pay you off to keep you sitting there. You won't win. Well, you can win if you win and get up while you're ahead, which you won't. But that's the way to do it. Or there's another way, start your own casino. But that takes capital. I call this process patternicity, the general process of the tendency to find meaningful patterns in both meaningful and meaningless noise. And when we find these patterns, we can make two kinds of errors. A type 1 error is a false positive, is believing a pattern is real when it is not. That it's like the pigeon or the rat. You thought there was some connection there, like the pigeon. There's no connection. But the type 2 error is a false negative, is not believing a pattern is real when it is, not recognizing a real pattern. That's not good either. So we make two kinds of errors in our thinking. Okay, so here's a thought experiment for you. Imagine you're a hominid on the plains of Africa 3.5 million years ago. Just a little Australopithecine. Your name is Lucy, let's say. And thank you for getting that. Not everybody... Lucy? What? And you hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator or is it just the wind? Your next decision could be the most important decision of your life. If you believe that the rustle in the grass is a dangerous predator and it turns out it's just the wind, that's a low-cost error to make. You just become more vigilant and cautious and you move around. On the other hand, if you believe that the rustle in the grass is just the wind and it turns out it's a dangerous predator, your lunch. Congratulations, you've just been given a Darwin Award for taking yourself out of the gene pool early before reproducing. We are the descendants of those most likely to make one kind of error than the other. In other words, patternicities occur whenever the cost of making a type 1 error is less than the cost of making a type 2 error. The problem is that assessing the difference between type 1 and 2 errors is highly problematic, especially in split-second life and death situations. So the default position is to assume that all patterns are real. Just to assume that all rustles of the grass are dangerous predators and not the wind, just in case. Now, why can't you just sit there and collect more data until you know you got it right? Because that, too, will make you lunch. You will win another Darwin Award for sitting around not making a decision, because the predator will make the decision for you, and that's it. So the default position is make a snap decision, assume that that patterns are real, just in case, and that's what our brains tend to do. So I'm arguing, this is an evolutionary model, I'm arguing that there's a natural selection for the cognitive process of assuming that all patterns are real and that all patternicities represent real and important phenomenon. So we're the descendants of the most successful patternicity primates. So let's look at some examples of these finding meaningful patterns in random noise. What do you see here? What? A horse, that's right. A horse, of course, unless it's a frog. So by giving you conflicting data, I'm confusing your senses in your brain. You have models in your brain already in memory of what horses look like and what frogs look like. And by rotating and giving you an ambiguous figure, I can make you switch back and forth. How about here? What do you see? Yeah, I don't see anything either. Other than it kind of looks like a Ray-Ban sunglasses, maybe. I'll flip it. That's upside down. I cheated a little bit. This is right side up. You see a cow? Oh, good audience. That's right. It's a cow. Now do you see the cow? Right. So by putting the red line around the cow, I am priming your brain. This is called cognitive priming. I'm priming your brain to see a pattern that maybe you wouldn't see otherwise. And then when I take it away, you still see it anyway. So your brain is recorded. All those 100 billion, actually it turns out it's about 80 billion neurons, that are up there storing information and so on, and now have stored that particular image. You'll never again not be able to see it now that I've given you some help. How about here? You see the Dalmatian dog? There it is. Again, I've given you the prime. That's what you're supposed to see. Now you see it. How about here? Saturn. Yeah, Saturn. How about here? Yeah, that's good. There's nothing there. But if you think you saw a pattern, see me afterwards, because that's a sign of pathology. No, just kidding. These two images here and here were used in an experiment to test whether subjects under conditions of feeling anxious and out of control were more likely to see illusory patterns that don't really exist. And it turns out they do. So there's something to do with to what extent patternicities or superstitions are related to anxiety or feelings of lack of control in your environment. My favorite example is from baseball. Athletes are notoriously superstitious, and baseball players are ripe for this. But not just any baseball players, batters, not fielders. This is the great Wade Boggs, the last player to come close to hitting 400. No one's done that since 1941, and he almost did it at 395. I think it was in 87, 88, something like that. Was notorious for his superstitious rituals he had to perform before each game, in which he had to eat chicken. He had so many recipes for chicken, he even published a cookbook called Foul Tips. You know, foul tips and, oh, okay. The great anthropologist Malinowski discovered in the Trobriand Islanders that the fishermen had elaborate rituals. The further out to sea they went, the less likely they were to be successful. The more dangerous the fishing expeditions were, the more complex the ritual behaviors were and their superstitions were. So there seems to be some relationship between to what extent you can control an environment and to what extent you can't. Batters fail 7 out of 10. The best ones fail 7 out of 10 times. Fielders are successful 95% of the time. So it's the batters it's the same people, it's the same brains, but it's only when you're batting that you feel superstitious, not so much fielding. A psychologist named Peter Bruegger discovered that significantly more patterns are perceived in the right hemisphere via the left visual field than in the left hemisphere via the right visual field. These are like split field or split brain experiments where you can get a subject to just see one side or another. And so these patterns, these illusory patterns, these patternicities tend to occur more in your right hemisphere than the left. Carl Sagan presciently wrote about this in The Dragons of Eden, the Pulitzer Prize-winning book. I still recommend it. It's a classic. He writes, there's no doubt that right hemisphere intuitive thinking may perceive patterns and connections too difficult for the left hemisphere. But it may also detect patterns where none exist. Skeptical and critical thinking is not a hallmark of the right hemisphere. So as a rough order of magnitude of the division of labor in your skull, you actually have two brains. They're connected in the middle by something called the corpus callosum that causes these two brains to talk to one another. Sometimes they get split for epileptic patients to stop the seizures from spreading from one hemisphere to another. They just cut it. And these have provided a unique opportunity to study the division of labor and which brain does what. Now, this is a little oversimplified. It's a lot oversimplified, but as a rough order of magnitude. Your right brain is doing more of this sort of holistic, intuitive, creative thought, art and music, and so on. And therefore, perhaps patternicity, this superstition, finding patterns that aren't real, is related to creativity. I'll come back to that in just a second. Peter Bruegger, I mentioned before, and his colleague Christine Moore did an experiment in which they gave 40 subjects L-DOPA. L-DOPA is a drug used for Parkinson's patients. It increases the amount of dopamine in your brain. Your dopamine is like the drug of choice for just about everything your brain does related to learning and memory. If you ever take a psych class or a cognitive psych class or a neuroscience class and you're not sure the answer on the test, just put dopamine. You're bound to get it right. So what he discovered was that, first of all, I did a paper pencil test. How much do you believe like in astrology or aliens or conspiracies, psychic power, ESP, ghosts, haunted houses, demons, so on? Scale of 1 to 10, right? So you just take a bunch of these little questions like this. Someone like me, I'd score very low, like a 1 or 2, right? Other people score like a 9 or a 10. What he discovered was that by giving everybody L-DOPA, it caused both believers and skeptics to identify scrambled faces and real and jumbled words as normal. In other words, giving everybody dopamine caused more patternicity to occur. But the effect was stronger for skeptics than it was for believers. Now that may seem a little strange until you think about it. If you are already way up here and you think everything is real, I believe everything, well, there's nowhere to go, right? You already are seeing patterns everywhere, right? But if you're like me and you're way down here, then there's plenty of room to go. So let's come back to that question of patternicity, dopamine, creativity, and madness. I'm not implying that finding illusory patterns is bad. It's not. In fact, it just is. It's what our brains do. It's neither good nor bad. The question is a sort of a signal-to-noise ratio. When is it good to find new patterns and when is it not? So my contrasting case studies in my book is Richard Feynman on the left here. Feynman was a creative genius. He won the Nobel Prize in Physics for his work in quantum electrodynamics. His work was so important in converting these complex mathematical equations into these elegantly simple line diagrams. They're called Feynman diagrams. There's one on the back of his 1976 Dodge Cargo van. These are so simply elegant, you can put them on a van. That van still exists, by the way. I salvaged it. I found it in a gas station in Monrovia and parked it in a storage unit in Pasadena where we were preserving it. As the story goes, Feynman was very famous, especially after his book came out, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, that when he was driving down Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena one day, somebody stopped him at the stoplight and said, "Hey, how come you have Feynman diagrams on your van?" He said, "Because I'm Feynman." Which I thought that would be really cool to be able to do that. And physicists still use Feynman diagrams today. By contrast, on the right is John Nash. He won the Nobel Prize in economics for his discovery of the mathematical equations describing behavioral game theory. That is how people act in a game, a contest of any kind, like a prisoner's dilemma or the ultimatum game. Any kind of contest in which people have strategies that they employ to try to win the game. And he discovered that at some point, people quit changing strategies and they reach like an equilibrium. So this is called a Nash equilibrium. Cold War strategy of mutual assured destruction. The Russians and us, we each have enough nukes to destroy the world, so there's no point in making a first strike, preemptive strike like Israel may do against Iran. There's no point in doing that if the other side will survive and then nuke you and then there's nothing left, right? So they reach a Nash equilibrium called mutual assured destruction. No one's going to do anything. Corporations competing in an industry reach a Nash equilibrium. They end up charging roughly the same prices. You'll notice this in college tuitions, for example. They all pretty much charge the same. It looks like collusion to the State Department who investigates these things, but it's not. It's a Nash equilibrium, right? So you may recognize actually the name John Nash because he was played by Russell Crowe in the film A Beautiful Mind. Not only did he see patterns that were real, he saw all sorts of patterns that were not real. Hidden conspiracies and cabals and secret agents and secret meetings late at night that he allegedly attended, aliens who spoke to him, and all sorts of things that were not real. And if you go too far down that pathway, you're given a label called schizophrenia or paranoid schizophrenia. So the rub is it's good to find new patterns. That's how you win Nobel Prizes. That's how you launch new art and musical genres, and that's how you become a success in any walk of life. You do something no one else has done in a new pattern. You find a new pattern. But if you go too far, that's just madness. So the question is, what's the balance there? Okay, so I'm going through these different influences on this, and I mentioned priming the brain to see and hear, and it will obey. That is, my premise is that what we think we do is that we think we look at the evidence and then draw a conclusion. And in fact, that isn't what we do. We draw our conclusion ahead of time, usually subconsciously, and we make a decision, and then we alert our cerebral cortex, this is the decision we made, now find some good reasons to believe it. And then your cortex launches into good reasons to believe, and that's how it works. This is how it works in religion, this is how it works in politics. If you ask somebody, why are you a Democrat? Nobody says, well, my parents were Democrats, and that's just the way I was raised, or I'm a Catholic because I was raised Catholic, or whatever. No, nobody says that. They all give perfectly rational arguments for why they are that way. But in fact, we now know from extensive research in psychology, cognitive science, and especially behavior genetics, that identical twins, for example, are raised apart in completely separate environments. Have substantially similar beliefs and attitudes. Not just personalities and temperament, which you might expect, but also which religion they choose, which political party they prefer. These sorts of things. About 50% of this is heritable. So, and we also know that most of our decisions we make are made seconds before you're consciously aware of it. So these are some fairly recent experiments in which you put subjects in a brain scanner. And I don't know if you know how these things work, but it's a gigantic magnet that causes the iron in the hemoglobin in your blood cells to shift poles magnetically. And this giant machine can record where the blood is moving around. It's pretty sophisticated. So you're thinking one kind of thought, and then you think some other thought, and the neurons are firing, and they use a lot of oxygen when they're working. So when they're firing and using a lot of oxygen, they send signals out, send more blood here because we need more oxygen. So more blood rushes over there, and this machine records that, right? These are functional MRI, magnetic resonant imaging. Okay, so you stick a subject in there, and you're packed in there with this helmet thing and goggles with little TV monitors that show you things from the experimental room on the outside. And they give you choices, and you have a little keypad. So it's like, do you want this one or do you want that one? And you pick which one. I want A or I want B, or I like this one better than that one. Or they do these sorts of things with, like, do you like the Coca-Cola logo or the Pepsi-Cola logo better? And you pick which one. And they can see where in your brain the logos are processed. It's very interesting research. But it also turns out that if you give somebody a choice, like go ahead and make a choice, which one, you can see the brain lighting up in these sort of subcortical areas fractions of a second to several seconds before the subject reports even having made the choice. It's like, so I give you the choice and you think, okay, I'll take that one. Actually, that decision has already been made for you. Well, it's you still. It's some other part of you. So this has profound implications for free will, for beliefs, for what we think. We're making choices about, I think I'm going to vote Obama this time. No, I'm going to vote Newt. Whatever you think. I'm going to listen to the arguments. I'm going to pick. That actually isn't what you're doing. There's something else going on that we don't fully understand. These decisions are being made subcortically, probably more related to how you feel emotionally about the candidate or about the religion or about whatever the belief is. And then it alerts your cerebral cortex, that's the one we picked. Now go find good reasons. And then we employ a whole host of these cognitive biases that help us pick the right arguments that support our beliefs. So if you're a conservative, you listen to conservative talk radio, you listen to Rush and Bill O'Reilly, and you read the Wall Street Journal, and you filter out all the stuff that doesn't fit, and you remember all those good arguments in support of your case. That's how it works, right? Let me give you a simple example of this, but I'm slightly hesitant on if my volume is going to be okay. I wonder if I should try. Well, okay, I'll try it. And then if it doesn't work, we'll just skip it. But basically, I'm going to prime your brain to, this is a very basic sensory test. I'm going to prime your brain to hear a certain song forward and then backwards. And you have to see if you can hear the hidden message. This is a sort of a famous phenomenon from the 70s that sort of got legs, that the rockers were embedding hidden messages. It's patternicity. Is there a real pattern there or not? So as an example of this, I'll play this for you forward with the words on the screen, and then I'll play it for you backwards without the words on the screen. See if you can hear the hidden messages from this song, and then with the words on the screen backwards. Okay, you ready? All right, so let's see if this is going to work. Okay, I think we have sort of a bad connection here. We're not getting any. Okay. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do it the old-fashioned way. There we go. If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alone there. It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still. So, I'm not sure what it means forward, but but when I was in high school, it was deeply meaningful. There were lots of good patterns there. All right, here it is backwards without the words on the screen. So you have to see if you can hear the hidden message. Okay, here we go. All right, now I'll play it for you. What'd you get? Something about Satan? Yeah, there's some Satan there. Okay, here it is. You don't want to go anywhere near that tool shed. It's a very, very dangerous place to be. So it turns out, like, what you're thinking about at the moment influences what you see. For example, in this picture, we're all environmentally sensitive thanks to Al Gore and the environmental movement that we want to save the whales, save the dolphins. So, of course, you all see the dolphins here, right? That's a dolphin there. There's a dolphin. See that dolphin there? That's a dolphin tail there, guys. It's a tail. What do you see here? How about here? Yeah, you're on the right track. It's two of those. Feet. Those are feet. Those are elegantly cropped, well airbrushed feet, but they're feet. These are Via Uno sandals. So what they're doing is they're cropping just to present sort of what's called a forced perspective. I'm going to make you see things that I know you already have a pattern in your brain already set. I know what you guys are looking at. Okay, so same thing with the ambiguous figure. Again, we're very sensitive about the environment and lights, and you see the lamp here, of course, right? Oh, yeah, the lamp. All right, that lamp. Here's a conflicting forced perspective where, on the one hand, this looks perfectly normal until you look up here and you're getting conflicting data. It's like something is wrong here. Both of these can't be right. And so it's forced perspective. So if you want to spend a half an hour having fun, just go to Google and just type in images forced perspective, and there's hundreds like this that people have cleverly concocted. The impossible crate illusion is another one of these where the front appears to flip to the back to the front. The boards seem to bend around each other. Again, you have models in your brain of what crates look like, of how boards act, angles, and so forth. And so this is messing with those systems by giving you conflicting data. And it causes it to switch back and forth. Now that's easy to do in 2D. Here it is in 3D. This is my friend, the late Jerry Andrus' impossible crate illusion in 3D. Jerry was a magician who specialized in constructing three-dimensional illusions that you could actually get inside and be completely blown away. Can you see how it's done? Camera angle is everything. So the photographer is off to the left, and Jerry has constructed this thing so at a certain angle, this board appears to overlap with this one, this overlaps with this one has a cable in it, and this one overlaps with that, and that overlaps with that. But even knowing that it's a trick, it's still a very powerful illusion. This one won the Best Illusion of the Year award a few years ago. It's the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It turns out it's not leaning at all. It's an illusion. No, just kidding. These scientists at McGill University discovered that if you put the same photograph side by side, it creates a bizarre illusion. It makes it look like one of them is leaning more than the other one. Which one looks like it's leaning more than the other one? One on the right, of course, right. So what's going on here? And just so you can see that is indeed the case, if you compare that angle to that angle, you'll see it's exactly the same on the measuring, or this one compared to this one. The problem is you're not comparing that one to that one. You're comparing that angle to that angle, so it looks much more bent. Because normally when you are standing and looking up at tall buildings, they're converging, like railroad tracks, they converge. There's a convergence effect there that's not there with that. Again, the point of this is that we think we're in touch with reality, and there is a reality out there, and we can know something about it using the best tools of science that we have, but it's very easy to be fooled. Faces also are very easy to see. These are patterns easy to see because we have evolved built-in facial recognition software in the temporal lobe just above and behind your ears called the fusiform gyrus. I'll show you in a minute. All you need are 3 data points, 2 eyes and a mouth. That's it, right? As an example of this, of course, you recognize our president, but if you look at it for a while, you'll see, well, one of them's a little odd. Which one looks a little strange? Right? Okay, so I'll rotate it and you'll see which one. So upside down, all you're doing is you're recognizing it's a face and it's somebody I know. But that's about it until you start looking for a while. And by looking, you start to scan the details, the eyes, the mouth, the ears, the nose. Okay, so we have 2 systems. Again, right back here, sort of right back behind your ears in the temporal lobe. Fusiform gyrus, there's two neural pathways. The magnocellular pathway that just scans for the general face, and it fires very rapidly. The system is very quickly. I see a face. That's somebody I know. Or not. And then the parvocellular pathway, facial details such as eyes, nose, and mouth fires a little slower, processes information a little slower. So this is like the double take, like I think I know you. Have we met before? See, so what you're doing when you're doing that is you're scanning the details and the pattern. You're looking for a match. Is there a match there? Is this somebody I know? Eyes, mouth, nose, ears, so on and so forth. Like this guy, you look familiar, and seriously, you actually look familiar, and I realize you look like Kurt Rambis, the Lakers basketball great. And so it's like, oh, okay, so there's a pattern there, match. And today on the plane flying out, there was Jerry West sitting just a couple of rows from me, the great Laker great. I thought, Jerry West, is that it? Oh, it actually is him. And I was like, it looks like Jerry West. Unfortunately, I didn't say anything because it was him. So that's and this actually explains the deja vu experience, right? Like, gee, I feel like I've been here before. I feel like this has happened before. It's just information coming in, close match to a pattern, a memory that's already programmed in there. It's just pattern recognition or not, and you're getting conflicting data, and you're just sitting there going, I really kind of feel like it's close, right? Those are the deja vu experiences. Because there's only so many variations on a theme in people's faces, in towns. And you go through, you drive across America, you say, boy, this town looks so familiar. I feel like I've been here before, and I've never even been to this state. I bet if we turn right, there's going to be like the restaurant and a gas station. Yeah, it turns out all towns in the Midwest have sort of certain pattern design. There's a corn silo out in the outskirts, and then you get the gas station on the left, the restaurant on the right. So there's only so many variations on that, and they're going to kind of feel close. You go, yeah, I feel like I've been here before. So there's nothing spooky about it, right? It's just neural processing. There's the face on Mars that the ufologists got very excited about in 1976 after the Viking spacecraft photographed this. And so they insisted in a letter-writing campaign to NASA, go take a close-up photograph so we can see that the Martians are there, and they build these gigantic monuments so we would see them. So they did. JPL sent the Mars in 2000. It was the survey, the Mars surveyor, that mapped every single foot or meter, I guess, of Mars. And you can now go to Google. Instead of Google Earth, you can get Google Mars. You can see it's amazing. But here it is up close. It's just an eroded mountain, of course, but you can, if you kind of squint, you can see the eyes and the nose and the mouth, right? But so by squinting, you're reducing the granularity of the data from a fine grain, so you see it's just a mountain, to coarse grain, and that gets your fusiform gyrus to fire that facial recognition. Oh yeah, 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth. That's a face, right? Somebody sent me this one a couple of weeks ago. They were just out on a hike. It's like, ooh, it looks like a face, right? It's just a rock. But you can see the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And here's the happy face on Mars, right? This one's in Canada. It's another one of my favorites. It's a huge valley. It's like 10 miles across. It's a highway that goes into it. It's called the Indian Head Valley. It's actually a valley. It's sunk in, even though it looks like it's rising up. So there's the coordinates. You can just, if you just Google Indian Head Valley, you'll find it. It's really fun to kind of zoom in on it. Here's one on a garage from tree shades. This one is very disturbing. It's a tumor. I don't even want to tell you where this tumor is, but you can figure it out if you look at the X-ray scan there. Anyway, I'm not sure this one's real. These things are easy to fake. Somebody sent me this one. This one's definitely real. This was discovered by a Tennessee baker in 1996. It's the nun bun, and he was charging people $5 a head to come in and see the famous nun bun, and until he got a cease and desist letter from Mother Teresa's lawyers. I guess charity only goes so far. Here's Our Lady of the Chicago Underpass. People thought they saw the Virgin Mary here or something. And the deeply religious came, and the not-so-religious, Satan loves you, 666. Right. Some people saw in this bonfire something significant. One of my all-time favorites is the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich that's sold on eBay for $28,500, only in America. So I got to hold it. I got to see it up close. There it is. I mean, I don't know what the Virgin Mary is supposed to look like, but it's definitely a striking face. But I don't know if it looks like the Virgin Mary. To some people, it looks more like Madonna. When I first saw it, I thought it looked more like Jane Russell, and then I realized it actually looks like my mom. That's my mom. By the way, if you're wondering what we atheists see, nothing. Our toast is about as boring as it gets. But we have a poster, our atheist toast. Here's the Virgin Mary on the side of a glass building in Clearwater, Florida. Richard Dawkins, the amazing Randi, and I went to visit it on a Good Friday several years ago. You can see it's a pretty big two-story image on the glass building there. The building was it was a bank, and then it was purchased by a Christian church from Michigan to restore sort of preserve the miracle. They even put a big crucifix up. We were there on a Good Friday, so a lot of people were there in their crutches and wheelchairs to be healed. I mean, they truly believed it was a miracle. So we walked around the back side of the building, and it turns out Clearwater, Florida isn't. The water isn't very clear. It's very mineralized. You can see it in the lawn there. Wherever there's a sprinkler head and some palm trees, the glass is stained. In fact, on the very back side, I found another one that they had started to wipe off, because I guess you can only have one miracle per building. But you can see you can see the sprinkler head there and the palm trees that they cut off, so you can see it better. And then, so back to that what's more likely question, this or that. Is it really a miracle of Mary, or is it a miracle of Marge? Well, I'm not Catholic, but I am a Simpsons fan, and I saw it and went, that looks like Marge Simpson. Dope. All right, let's go back to our thought experiment. You're a hominid on the plains of Africa 3.5 million years ago. You hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator or just the wind? What's the difference between the wind and a dangerous predator? The wind is an inanimate force. A dangerous predator is an intentional agent. So I call this process agenticity to sort of match the patternicity concept. The tendency to infuse those patterns with meaning, intention, and agency, often invisible beings from the top down. Souls, spirits, ghosts, gods, demons, angels, aliens, intelligent designers, government conspiracists, and all manner of invisible beings, agents with power and intention, are believed to haunt our world and control our lives. I think it's the basis of animism. There's animistic spirits throughout all of nature, or the belief in polytheism, multiple gods, or even monotheism. There's a single God. Aliens are coming down from on high to rescue us. I mean, just think about the narratives of science fiction and abductees. They always describe the aliens as these godlike beings that are up there coming down to rescue us. It's in every one of these science fiction movies. They're always super advanced, technologically, scientifically, morally more advanced than us. This is the theme of the classic film on the screen here, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Do see the 1951 version. You can probably skip the Keanu Reeves remake. It was okay, but they missed some of the great themes, I think. One of which was, it's a Christ allegory. Just think of the Christ story. Christ comes, God sends his son, but he is God. You figure that out. But anyway, he comes to earth to warn us and rescue us, redeem us, right? And this is the Christ theme of The Day the Earth Stood Still. His name, Klaatu, his name is Mr. Carpenter in the movie. In case you didn't get the allegory, Mr. Carpenter, right? And he comes down and he tries to meet with the leaders of the earth, but they won't meet with them. So he mingles among the common people like Jesus did. And then there's even a Mary Magdalene figure played by Patricia Neal, who they kind of have some kind of a relationship like Jesus and Mary. Who knows what that was, right? And then he's killed by the authorities, right? Tracked down, hunted down, and killed just like the Romans did to Jesus. And then he's put in a tomb. In the movie, he's put in his jail, or this sort of morgue. And then Patricia Neal has to go to Gort the robot and say, Gort, Yes, Klaatu Barada Niktu, thank you. Usually somebody knows that classic sci-fi line. And so Gort gets the instructions, go get him. So he goes and gets him out of the tomb and takes him back to the spaceship and resurrects him. He's back alive again. And then in the original movie, and so when you watch the movie now, you'll see the Patricia Neal character sitting there. And they got the music and the lights, and he's dead, and then he's alive. And she goes, wow, that's incredible. I mean, that's the power of science and technology in the future. And he goes, no, only the Great Spirit can do that. Nobody knows when a man shall die. Yeah, it's like, what is that doing in there? Well, it turns out if you go look at the original script, he basically goes, yeah, that's it. We've learned to play God. And the Breen Censorship Board in the 50s said, you can't say that to an American audience. That's, no. So they changed it. The Great Spirit in the sky. Okay. Right. So, but that's still that same idea, that there's somewhere out there, there's a greater power than us. Even this, you talk to the SETI scientists, they've worked all this out through thought experiments. What would the aliens be like? They're not going to be just like us, but 5 years more advanced, like they think at Roswell, right? The aliens landed in Roswell, New Mexico, and we back-engineered silicon chips. I mean, transistors, 5 years more advanced than the vacuum tubes we were using. Okay, to achieve interstellar spaceflight, to be able to come here, you need more than 5 years better than vacuum tubes, right? And in any case, the aliens always look like bipedal primates, except they got gnarly stuff on their forehead and they speak English with a weird accent. Okay, this is not what they're going to be like. This is the restrictions of Hollywood wardrobe budgets. Okay, we got to put the actor in a rubber suit, so make him look kind of like us and throw some goo on his head. All right, okay. So but how much more advanced will they be? They'll be not 5 years, probably not even 500 or 5,000, probably more like 500,000 or 5 million years more advanced than us. So look how far we've come in just 50 years. Genetic engineering. Think of the iPhone. You have in your smartphone, every one of you here in the room, more computing power than the Apollo astronauts had. I mean, that's just in a couple of decades, right? Take that out, 5 million years. These beings will be so advanced they would be indistinguishable from anything we can conceive of as God, right? So the whole thing is, sort of concocted in our heads that there's somebody out there. Even the intelligent designer that creationists talk about is just another one of these agents. It's this intelligent agent that can genetically engineer cells and so on. And then tangentially, even conspiracies are kind of a hidden agent, a force at work there. Somebody's behind the scenes pulling the strings, right? So we have this idea, the Illuminati, or these 12 guys in London running the world, this sort of thing. It's compelling that we think that they're there. Now, I should note parenthetically, in case you're interested in conspiracies are not like some of these other things that I think don't exist. Conspiracies do happen, right? Watergate was a conspiracy. Lincoln was assassinated by a conspiracy. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie Chotek that triggered the First World War, that was a conspiracy. So it's not that the 9/11 truthers can't be right. It's just that they're not right. You have to just take them one at a time and see do we have any evidence for this, right? Typically what happens is that conspiracies never go like people plan. People fumble and bumble and they stumble around and they screw up and they chicken out and they tell their spouse or their best friend or they squeal and everybody hears about it. 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. You know that saying, right? I mean, Watergate is a perfect example. It's the most powerful administration in the world and they couldn't even break into a hotel room. That's typically how these things go, right? The Lincoln assassination, they were supposed to decapitate the entire cabinet. Everybody, Johnson, Secretary of State, Secretary of War, they were all supposed to be murdered that night. And people they screwed up, they chickened out, they didn't get their weapon in time, whatever. That's normally how it goes. And then we have an added cognitive bias there that we tend to like the size of the event in our minds to be matched by a causal agent of equal size. So think of JFK, assassinated, leader of the free world, handsome, articulate, intelligent, and so on. And he was killed by who? Lee Harvey Oswald, this lone nut, a nobody. So he's here. The cause is down here. This isn't bad. So no, had to be like the CIA and the FBI and the KGB and the Cubans and the Castro and the Mafia and Johnson and so on. And pretty soon they had to meet in a room bigger than this to coordinate all their efforts. And not one of them spilled the beans later, not one. There's not one piece of evidence that anybody other than Oswald was involved. Same thing with Princess Di. Princess Di, she's a princess. She's good looking. Wow. That's everything. She has a British accent. In America, good looking British accent, you're there. You're a star. What was the cause of death? Speeding, drunk driving, no seatbelt. There's 20,000 people a year killed in America of those causes. How mundane is that? That's not good enough for our princess. No, she had to be murdered by the MI6 or some Arab cabal, or the royal family had her bumped off because she was bothering Charles. Poor Charles. He wanted to be with Camilla. Okay. So basically, the more complex the conspiracy, the more people that have to be involved, the less likely it is to be true. All right, let's return to the brain and talk about where agenticity happens. Because this is going to explain a lot. I'm going to explain to you why people believe in God. What is the source of belief in any kind of supernatural or paranormal phenomenon? It begins with something called dualism. We're natural-born dualists. We tend to think that there are two substances in the universe, brain and mind, body and soul, corporeal and incorporeal, physical material stuff and immaterial stuff. This is why we can watch movies like Tom Hanks in Big, or 13 Going on 30, or like Freaky Friday, where Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan switch bodies. And the corporate mom is down in high school talking about boys with the girls, and the teenage girl is in the corporate boardroom, and hilarity ensues. And we all enjoy it because we get it. We get, okay, yeah, they switched. But let's just think about this for a second. What switched? Well, their personalities or their memories, or the soul, there's something, the non-physical stuff. Well, what would that be? Because where is that? We know where it is. It's in the brain. I mean, the brain is the one organ donation where you want to be the donor, not the recipient. Right? Because if you get somebody else's brain, bye-bye, you're gone. You're now that other guy. You're just a body housing all your memories in the brain. Nevertheless, the intuition we all have, and this is true from babies at about age 6 months on, perceive a dualism. There's clever experiments they do with little toys and things. And they also perceive agents readily as intentional agents, not just inanimate objects doing things, but actual intentional agents. So we're born dualists. We just naturally think that there is, even though, I'll go out on a limb here and say, there is no evidence for mind or soul that we know of. I mean, I've just not seen any. I write about this all the time, and I read all these studies, just not seen any. If you think about it, what would it take? Because what is your soul? It's your pattern. Back to the pattern. It's your pattern of everything that you are, your memories, your personality, everything that's you. That is you. And where is it? Well, we know it's in your brain. And we know what happens when your brain starts to die of dementia or Alzheimer's. The cells die, the brain shrinks, the neurons get all the little plaques and tangles, and the person just disappears. You see everything gets smaller. They sort of hunch over more, their handwriting gets smaller, their gait gets smaller, and then they end up curled up in a bit. I mean, they just disappear, the memories are gone. So to my dualist friends like Deepak Chopra, who I just spent the weekend with last weekend at his big conference in Southern California, who's a hardcore dualist, I said, Deepak, where is Aunt Millie's mind when her brain dies of Alzheimer's? Because we just had a talk from this expert on Alzheimer's. And he said, it's in the non-local quantum field. Okay. Where's that? Because, it's like the Matrix, he said. It's like the Matrix. It's like, okay, where's the Matrix? I mean, I know I can get it on Netflix, but, they'll send me a disc, or it'll stream into my computer and I can watch it, but it's a physical representation. And so his analogy is that the brain is the hardware and the mind is the software. Okay, but without the hardware, where is the software? Okay, where is it? This is the problem. Now, it's conceivable, if you're a science fiction writer or you want to speculate about science, we could download our memories into a supercomputer, and the computer will last longer than the electric meat of our protein brains, which only lasts a few decades. But conceivably, you can build a computer that lasts centuries and carry on. Eventually, you'll be in a cloud, the cloud, and that could last thousands of years. We could scale up to immortality using science and technology. This is the idea. But don't worry about that, because I'm skeptical of that too. I mean, this could happen. I'm hoping they're right before I die. I told Ray Kurzweil and these guys that write about this stuff, if you guys achieve immortality, like right after I die, I'm going to be so pissed. I mean, this is going to be so unfair. I'm coming back to haunt you. But note that the way I'm thinking about it, there has to be something that carries the pattern forward. Because if there's not a substrate to hold the pattern, you're gone. That's it. Now, it's not impossible. Maybe God did this, or an extraterrestrial of superpower has a way of storing in some cloud we can't see that's just pure energy or something like this. Yes, of course, all that's possible. But that doesn't make it true, right? We actually have to have some evidence for that, which we don't have yet. Okay, continuing, theory of mind. Theory of mind is mind reading. This is also involved. We actually know where in the brain. Those are the parts of the brain that's located. Mind reading is when I read your mind. Not telepathically. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. No, this is just my imagining what it's like to be you and trying to anticipate what you would think or feel if that happened to you. Okay, so I might, like before the talk, I was thinking, well, I wonder if they would like this joke. Well, let's see. If I was sitting there, would I like that joke? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I'll change it this way. So I'm just mind reading you. All human relationships depend on mind reading. That's all we're doing. We're just reading each other's minds, trying to anticipate each other, right? So that is related to these areas of the brain. We know that if you stimulate the temporal lobes, remember the temporal lobes with the facial recognition software, they're also involved with other things. Wilder Penfield began his famous experiments in 1963. These have been done and redone ever since, of actual stimulation. You put an electrode right into the brain, right into the neural tissue, right into a single cell. They make these electrodes so tiny. You put them into a single cell and record the cell firing. It sends a signal. You can record it. And you have a little recording device and you can measure it and so forth. And so these are done on mostly epileptic patients, by the way. You can't get ethical boards to say, yeah, it's okay to take 18-year-old undergraduates and cut their head open and stick it. They won't let you do that, unfortunately. But if you're an epileptic patient and you're going under brain surgery anyway because they want to do something to stop the seizures from spreading, you get permission. You just ask them ahead of time, is it okay if while you're under, we wake you up and poke around and ask you what's going on? And they always go, yeah, it's great. I mean, almost always. Anyway, but if you stimulate different parts of this big green lobe here, you can stimulate feelings of deja vu, out-of-body experiences, trance and fugue states, feelings of being in the presence of others, hearing music, angelic voices, intense meaningfulness, connected to a force greater than themselves, even talking to God. If you push through the temporal lobe right down into the limbic system, you can get feelings of intense meaningfulness, depersonalization, a connection with God or the cosmos, a feeling that there's something or somebody else out there. We know about the sense-presence effect. People under certain conditions feel like there's somebody else with them, often on the left side, because it's probably a right hemisphere thing. Arctic explorers, Himalayan climbers who do K2 and Everest. My brother-in-law he's done Everest a couple times, and he's told me about the imaginary friend he has there that he talks to and talks back and so on. He knows it's not there, it's on his left side. It's not an altitude thing, it's not just oxygen deprivation, because it happens at sea level for Arctic explorers and solo sailors. So when you're alone, tired, cold or hot, dehydrated, fatigued, starving, especially alone, the brain just creates this sense of presence. There's somebody else here, right? That's a kind of an invisible agent there. And there's a lot of research on this now. The ultramarathon athletes, like the Iditarod dog sledders, they go 10 days without sleep. Well, they sleep a little bit. They have these incredible hallucinations. They're just fantastic. And so I write about these. And You can create near-death and out-of-body experiences. We know these are happening in the brain. You're not going anywhere. It's all in your head. We know this guy, for example, James Winery. He accelerates these pilots in the centrifuge, Air Force pilots, in training, to train them not to black out when they pull high Gs. And they all black out. It's just a training exercise. And a significant percentage of them have out-of-body experiences. They feel like they're floating out of their body through a tunnel, white light at the end of the tunnel. And they have a camera on them. They're just sitting there. They're just drooling, right? They're passed out. They're not going anywhere, but it's a neural activity. This one has to do with hypoxia or oxygen deprivation. You can stimulate it by touching that red spot on the temporal lobe. This was a 2003 epileptic patient that they stimulated, and she's awake. So they have like a little rheostat. They ramp up the electricity, and she's like, "Whoa, I'm way up on the ceiling now." And they go, "Oh, I'm just barely above the bed." And they poke around. "Oh, my left leg. Oh, now it's my right leg. It's left arm, right arm. Way up, way down." She's just lying there, not moving at all. This is all just in the brain, nothing more than the brain. You can do it using the God helmet. This is Michael Persinger's neuroscience lab at Laurentian University. He basically, you put this helmet on, and it has these solenoids that bombard your temporal lobes. And so I went and did this, and it was not as good as what I've read about hallucinogenic drugs, but you can actually get like a sense presence and out of body experience and that sort of thing. So we just have to remember the brain, because I have to change this, because I just read a new neuroscience study that says not 100 billion neurons, it's 80 billion. We're off by 20 billion. What's 20 billion? 100 billion neurons? Well, anyway, it's a lot of neurons, and there's 1,000 billion synaptic connections between the 100 billion neurons. So basically, we can explain all this stuff by just scaling up the complexity. And we have no idea how this results in things like the qualitative experience of being a bat, or you, or me, or whatever. We just don't know. It's just a new field. So that's a good task for you students. But to say I don't know doesn't mean, therefore, it's some quantum non-locality field, or it's God, or it's angels, or I don't know is the principle of skepticism. It's okay to just say, I don't know, and just let it sit right there. Put somebody in charge. Put your graduates. You go figure that out, right? So my point is, all belief is mediated by the brain. The mind is just a word for what the brain does. And if the portion of the brain is lost, the mind function associated with it is lost unless it's rewired. But no neural structure, no mind function. Okay, so I want to wrap it up by just talking a little bit about back to our decisions are made, and then we employ different cognitive biases to convince us we're right. The biggest one is the confirmation bias, the tendency to seek and find confirmatory evidence for one's belief and ignore disconfirmatory evidence. So as a fun example of this, this is how astrologers and tarot card readers and palm readers, this is how they operate. You've seen these guys on TV, they talk to the dead, right? They're talking to John Edwards. Today we'll talk to the dead, right? Turns out anybody can talk to the dead. It's really easy. It's getting the dead to talk back. That's the hard part. And I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so it's not hard. This is called cold reading. It's a cold reading technique where you read somebody cold you've never met. And it doesn't matter if you're using tarot cards like I have here, or an astrological chart, or the palm, whatever. Those are just devices used to distract the person and make it seem like you're gleaning information that you're actually not. So the cold reading technique is you start off very broad, and you throw out a lot of statements, and you ask a lot of questions, and you wait for the positive feedback to come back. And like Skinner's pigeons or the slot machine humans at Vegas, you don't need to pay off very often. Just an occasional hit, maybe 1 out of 20. And they will go away from that reading going, that is unbelievable. He got this, this, and this, and that. How do you explain that, Dr. Shermer? Because this is what I always get. Explain that one. It's like, well, we recorded it, and there were 250 other statements that he missed. Right? So it's the confirmation, but you're only going to remember the 4 hits. You're going to forget the 250 misses, right? So anyway, but how do you do it? Okay, so you start broad. It's like, okay, so I have a sense about you, sir, that you're, well, I get a sense you're very intelligent, thoughtful, and you have a good sense of humor, and you enjoy the company of other people. Now, what's he going to say? You know, that's just really not me. I'm really not that bright. I'm pretty slow-witted and dim, and I don't like other people. Yeah, right. Okay, so you can't go wrong with what's called the Barnum effect, the reading, the P.T. Barnum. You offer something for everybody, right? Keep it real positive in general. And then you just start to refine in more and more, and you work through the 4 different categories that people want to talk about: love, health, money, and career. I got all this, by the way, from a psychic who worked for the Psychic Friends Network, which is not a business, and ironically, not one of the psychics saw that coming. But basically, they give you a playbook. It's the book on how to do cold readings, and it's a scam. And the point is to keep the caller on the phone at $3.95 a minute for as long as you can. Not too long. About 20 minutes is about ideal. Too short, you don't make enough money for the company. Too long, and the people don't pay their phone bills. And so this is a problem, because if you have a $500 phone bill, people don't want to pay it, right? So they default on their phone. And so there's a balance there. So you keep them on hold for a while, and then you go through those general readings. And then there's a whole list of things that you can just say that turn out to be true for most people. Like, I'm getting that there's something about a scar on your knee. Do you have a scar on your knee? Right? Most people have a scar on their knee. Left knee, right knee, everybody fell down at some point in their life. Or there's, I'm getting something about a white car. I don't know what it is about a white car. A red dress. There's something, ma'am, I'm getting that you used to wear your hair longer when you were younger. Is this true? Is that, yeah. Sir, I think I'm getting the sense of, like, in your garage you have some tools you've been meaning to fix that aren't working right now. Ma'am, you have I'm getting like an earring. You have one earring and you're missing the other one, and you're hanging on to it because you're going to find that other one. You just keep searching, you'll find it. If somebody's lost somebody loved, so you start off with I'm getting a father figure. Father figure. Well, this is gold. This could be grandfather, father, uncle, friend of the family, anybody who's male. Close enough, right? And then the cause of death. I'm getting, there's something he either went suddenly or it lingered. And they'll just blurt out, oh yeah, oh no, he had a heart attack. Yeah, no, don't tell me, because I'm getting that he went like that. Was it heart? I'm getting something about the pain here in the chestal area. And they'll misremember it as, well, he got the name of my grandma. I'm getting a G name, or M name, a J name. Apparently the dead are not real clear. The dead can speak clearly on like white car and red dress, but they can't quite get names for some reason. Anyway, and it goes on and on like this. There's hundreds and hundreds of, if you go to skeptic.com, you look up a psychic for a day, I show you exactly how to do it and all the hundreds of lines you can use to convince people that this stuff works. And so it's pretty gold. So, but it's just I want to believe. Anybody that goes there is likely to be primed to believe, the priming effect. And then the confirmation bias, they just remember the hits, they forget the misses, and you're off and running. So we'll put all those together, adding expectation violation, and I'll end with this short video example of, so we'll do the sound thing with this microphone again. So this is, it's just a little film on this.
This is the venue they chose for their fake auditions for an advert for lip balm.
We're hoping that we can use part of this in a national commercial, right? And this is a test on some lip balms that we have over here. These are our models who are going to help us, Roger and Matt. And we have our own lip balm, and we have a leading brand. Would you have any problem kissing our models to test? You wouldn't? No. You think that was fine? That would be fine. Okay. So that this is a blind test. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put a blindfold on. Okay, now can you see anything? No. Hold it so you can't even see down. Okay. It's completely blind now, right? Yes. Okay. Now what I'm going to be looking for in this test is the texture, right, and maybe if you can discern any flavor or not. Okay. Have you ever done a kissing test before? Okay, I'm going to ask you to pucker up big, and lean in just a little bit, okay? Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.